Maharaj. Dandavas everyone.
Dandavad Ishanuga, how are you?
Maharaj. How are you?
Dandavad Janardan Falguni.
Dandavad Maharaj.
Dandavad Maharaj.
Dandavad. Dandavad Rasaraj. Bhagavan.
Dandavad Maharaj.
Dandavad Maharaj. It's an honor always to speak to you.
Dandavad Maharaj. Dandavad.
Dandavad Krishna Mohini. Dandavad Tungarasa.
Dandavad Maharaj. Dandavad all devotees.
And Dandavad Pavan Moyi, I can't see her, but I see her kitchen. Oh, there you are. Dandavad. Ah. And there's Subhadra too. Subhadra, Dandavad, ¿cómo estás, Subhadrita? Ajá. ¿Qué haces? ¿Qué estás haciendo, Subhadra?
Haciendo una tarjeta para la mamá que cumple años. Se llama Sundar.
Shama Sundari is her birthday, huh?
Sí, Maharaj.
All right. Now, is it warming up in England?
Yeah, it is actually. I don't know if it's just a, passing thing, but it was like 20 degrees today.
Well, so how was it? How was it at the beginning of March? Was it very cold?
Yeah, like 3-4 degrees.
Well, that's what they say. They say March comes in like a lamb, goes out like a lion, or it comes in like a lion, goes out like a lamb. So came in like a lion, going out like a lamb. Now getting warm.
Yes.
And Bhagavan, ¿dónde estás, Bhagavan?
I'm at home here in Barcelona, Maharaj.
In Barcelona.
Yeah.
Pero en Barcelona, España.
Almost, Maharaj. In Barcelona, London.
Barcelona, Venezuela, no?
Yes.
Okay. ¿Y qué pasa, Chandra? ¿Pareces cansado o qué?
Oh, all good, Maharaj. Happy to see you. Happy to hear you.
Estás como eso, cansado, ¿no?
No. Es un tic. Uno se pone viejo y uno agarra tic y no los deja de hacer. ¿Cómo está usted?
Pues, chévere.
Muy bien.
So, Devashis, do we have a new influx of questions from Anonymous?
No, actually, we don't have any this evening. I mean, not to me.
What is true? Yeah, they're true. It's questions. Tell them.
Ahí está. Madhu Gopal está. Algunos mexicanos ya ingresando. Gaurachandra, do you or Falguni have any questions?
I do, but I need to read. I need a few minutes.
Okay.
If that's okay.
Uh-oh, it sounds like a serious question.
She wrote the book and everything, so be ready.
Uh-oh.
Oh.
I can always just say, I don't know about that. Next question.
Oh, that's a very good question. Next.
Tungarasa. I'll get some more weather updates. Tungarasa.
Dandavat.
How is the weather there in Norway?
A bit cold right now, but it was very sunny today.
Ah,
Maybe 10, 12 degrees.
now.
No. During the day,
10 or 12 degrees during the day. How many degrees now?
now about 0, maybe +1, 2.
Uh, oh, a very warm day.
Yes, sitting on the sun was very pleasing.
Nice. 10 or 12 degrees, not so bad.
Not so bad, no. Become warmer and warmer.
Mm.
Yes. Spring.
Yeah, when does spring officially start?
Wow.
Something in March. At the end of March, I think.
21st of March. It's
21st, yes.
Yeah.
We still don't have any calendars, right?
Not yet.
Yeah, I calculated using that site, and there were at least some days in the Sri Chaitanya Saraswat Mat website, except for the Ekadasis, and then I just kind of calculated the Ekadasis for California using that site I said about that something Panchang. Forget the name of it, something Panchang. And I went there and I calculated the Ekadasis for California, just a guess, but something's better than nothing. I mean,
Yeah.
So, and I contacted Tridundi, and Pritu told me that Dundee Maharaj in Ukraine is in a very dangerous situation.
Oh.
Not because of the attack, but because he's Russian and he's in Ukraine, and the atmosphere, the people in Ukraine are not, they're a little vengeful towards Russians.
Yeah.
So he has to kind of escape from there. And I don't know what will become of Avadut Maharaj's Ukraine center. Maybe it's far enough in the countryside that it won't be so greatly endangered, but or maybe it is because of the attack. But I was reading online today that just said Ukraine's not very fit. People in Ukraine, they really don't. They're not very. They're blaming the Russians as well as Putin for the attacks.
Yeah, difficult.
So Pritu said that up till now, Dundee Maharaj hasn't been able to get his equipment together and everything to do the calculations yet, although he's working on it. So I made some calculations, and I think the first one is, after you look at the regular dates, I think the first one is maybe for the 28th of March.
Monday. Yeah. I think we have, at least for the UK, we have all the dates up until Gurudev's disappearance.
The Ekadasis also?
Ekadashis also, yeah.
Okay. Do you have the 28th as Ekadasi?
Yes, man, yeah.
Okay. And then you can look on the calendar on our website. It has also Ram Navami, because you're going to especially in East London, you're going to have some of our Indian guests coming for Ram Navami.
Yes. It's Sunday this year, so.
Is it this Sunday?
Is it this Sunday? No.
No.
April the 10th.
April the 10th. April 10th.
Okay, April 10th. Aha. All right, Falguni, you've had 2 minutes now. Let's.
Okay, so I'm reading the Jaiva Dharma, and at some point, Rajanatha is asking to Babaji Maharaj different kinds of questions, but at some point he comes to an answer where he explains how the eternal world is always present, and that our arguments or the way we speak is always attached to past, present, and future, and therefore,
The eternal what?
the eternal world where Krishna is, the eternity.
Oh, the eternal world. Okay.
Yeah. But at some point within his explanation, which is quite large, he advised to Rajanatha that he should not focus too much in all these statements and argumentations of past, present, future, or where Chit is coming, or where the Jiva is coming, and where it's going, how it's created, how it's not created, but he should actually feel the truth. He says, at some point, he says, our statements are material. Whether we speak about is interprets with the dirt of the words, but you will feel what the truth is. He's telling him that he will feel it. And I was wondering what that feeling is. And here is my main question: if you have ever yourself feel something related to this.
Okay, so first, who's speaking?
Babaji.
Babaji.
Prem Das Babaji, I think it is.
Who's that?
Oh,
Jaiva
and
Dharma.
this is in Jaiva Dharma.
Yeah.
And Jaiva Dharma is saying about the eternal world, and he's saying it's not a. Well, you said it's in. This is in reference to what? Krishna Leela or?
Okay, so this is the original question he makes, Rajanatha. He said, I have already heard that the Chit world is eternal, and so are the Jivas. How are then the growth, creation, and revelation of eternal things possible if they are revealed at some point in time and were unrevealed previously? How then can their eternity be possible? So he explains how the eternal world is always present, and that whatever argumentation we have is always based on past, present, or future. So in the end, what he says is that don't focus on that. You should actually focus on that the argumentations are not something that's going to bring you the revelation. Is something that is actually you are going to feel. And then later on he says the more you know about yourself, the more you will feel your essential nature to be superior to the material world. You will not be benefited if only I tell you this or you hear of it from me. The more you rose up your Chit character by means of the culture of Harinama, the better will you get the conception of the Chit world.
Okay.
With the internet, it is cutting off.
Yeah. So what is your question?
My question is, what is this feeling he's mentioning? This is something that you will feel, and that you shouldn't focus on the argumentations, but something that you will feel it. And I'm asking you if you have ever felt anything like this.
Well, I remember one thing, just as an introduction, that Bhaktivinoda Thakur, I remember where he comments that argument is not a good instrument for understanding spiritual topics. That argumentation, he says, or you can say, maybe you can say, well, this isn't argumentation, it's discussion. But still, the idea is that there is a limitation which comes with trying to understand things empirically, trying to understand things through our senses, our mind, our intelligence. So there's a limitation there. And I'm also remembering where Guru Maharaj is talking about, this was something I remember in reference to that discussion where Guru Maharaj talks about the nature of the, and I mentioned this before, about the nature of the verse which says, Savai pumsam parodharmo yata ubhaktirad hoksaje, ahaituki apradiyat yayatma suprasidati. And, you know, the highest engagement will be when we are Savai pumsam parodharmo yato bhaktirad hoksaje. That when we have a loving relationship, what is it? Savai pumsam parodharmo yato bhaktirad hoksaje. When we have a connection with the loving devotional service of the Lord. Savai pumsam parodharmo yato bhaktirad hoksaje. And then it says, Savai pumsam parodharmo yato bhaktirad hoksaje, ahaituki pradiyat ya. So we discussed before ahaituki, which means without any material motivation, and ahaituki pradiyat ya, without any cessation. So Guru Maharaj explains without cessation means, he says, it's very difficult if you understand something as coming from us, that by my own will or my own intellect or my own endeavor, that I will get some understanding of spiritual consciousness, because it's talking about Chit Shakti, that I will get some understanding by my own limited resources, so that it can be understood that ahaituki, in the sense it has no material motivation, haituki pradiyatya, and no interruption, right? So haituki means that Guru Maharaj explains that the spiritual world already exists in activities of devotion and in consciousness of living entities participating in that, on that plane already exists, and by the grace of the divine grace, by the mercy of Gurudev, the Lord, the devotees, it can descend to one. He says, and that it's eternal, that it has no interruption. He says, can mean that it's has no material, that it already exists, and it's irresistible. So I'm trying to think which word. Haituki pradiyat. So haituki, without material motivation, right? And without any interruption. So without any material motivation means that divine world exists already and can descend to us, and that it has that means it's irresistible, that it cannot be, that it's going on eternally. So let me get these Guru Maharaj's explanation correct first. Can you say something, Devashish, about these two words? Ahaituki pradiyat. Yeah. I want to see.
Yeah, means existing eternally and no, irresistible, as you said, irresistible. Ahoituki apratiyata.
So I just want to see the definitions. Savai pumsam paro dharmo. I just want to see. Okay. Unmotivated and uninterrupted. So unmotivated. Let's see. This will completely satisfy the self. Okay. Ahaituki, causeless, and apradiyata. Without causeless, ahaituki, without material motivation, apradiyata, uninterrupted. So, causeless can also be said to be no material cause, but the spiritual world, the spiritual plane of devotion, the spiritual plane of consciousness, that already exists, that it eternally exists, and that can descend to us. It's not that we can aspire to attain that plane on the basis of our own limited endeavors or our own limited mind, our own limited intelligence. So it's causeless, and you can say, well, how can you say anything in this world is causeless? Well, the answer is it's not from this world. In this world, there's always cause and effect. There's always, action, reaction, laws of physics. But causeless means that it's not, you can say, what is cause? What is cause and effect? It's karma. But there is a world beyond the world of karma. That is the spiritual world. And that it's uninterrupted. You can say another meaning of uninterrupted is it can't be interrupted because it's irresistible. And Guru Maharaj explains that when that plane that will be irresistible, just like there are things in this world that are not subject to our power to resist. For instance, we're all, especially those of us who are older, we understand that there's nothing, although we are eternal souls, you can't resist death. Nobody can ultimately resist death. It's irresistible. That's just my way of thinking. But anyway, ahaitukiya pradiyata. So when Falguni asks the question that about that these things shouldn't be argued about, Bhaktivinoda Thakur has said, argument is not the proper medium for understanding spiritual topics. And in Jaiva Dharma, he's saying that you have to be able to understand them yourselves based on your own devotion, based on your own experience. And that's to say, how can you describe in material words something which is not material to begin with? How can the mind and the intelligence and the false ego, how can you understand that which is beyond the comprehension of the mind and the intelligence and the senses, etc.? So all that makes perfect. That seems completely understandable to me. That in the Jaiva Dharma he's saying No, it's not. This is not to be argued about. You can't get anywhere with argument. You won't be able to understand these topics by argument. Then what was your final question to me, Falguni? You said, have I ever experienced what? What is it you're asking if I've ever experienced?
He says that that you should feel the truth within yourself.
Yes.
Have you
Have I what?
For what?
have you felt that truth or that feel of, because he says here the
Yeah,
more you know
of
about,
course. Of course I have. And of course others have also. Because, you know, we're going on and the principles of the scriptures and the descriptions of the scriptures and the words of Gurudev, everything, they're giving us guidance, they're giving us realization. But there are certain things that are not necessarily also contained in necessarily, and maybe by their grace we can feel these things or we can get these things. But every day, isn't it, that there's something that you will think about or you will consider, and you'll think, oh, previously I never understood that topic, and now I do. That now for the first time there's something that's going on like a light or something that I can understand. And I think that to a certain extent that happens with many persons. For instance, when you're reading the scriptures, you read the scriptures and there may be some points that you just read over and you think you understand and you're reading them and you're going on. But then there's sometimes when you're reading those same words and you may consider, now there's something, now I can understand what is being said here. Before I only understood it superficially, but now I have some understanding of what's being said. Maybe on some point that's not, maybe on some point that you will even later forget, what that feeling was. But always, I mean, I feel like when I'm reading or hearing that there's something will come that I'll say, oh, I didn't understand that point before. Now I can understand it. But I feel some things, and I use this example of a sitar or a veena. A sitar or veena has strings that you play, and then it has strings that you don't play, that they just vibrate. When the other notes are played, those strings, they vibrate like sympathetically. You know what there's? I think they're called that even. Sympathetic, what are they called?
Yeah, that's what they're called, yeah. Sympathetic strings.
What?
Sympathetic strings, yeah, that's what they're called on the sitar and other similar instruments.
Yeah. There's strings that aren't ever touched or played, but when the other notes are played, those strings vibrate sympathetically. The vibration of the other strings produces some vibration in them. And I feel sometimes the words of Gurudev, the words of the scriptures can produce some sympathetic vibrations in ourselves, which gives, actually I find, is a cause of hope, because sometimes one feels that, am I ever getting this? And of course, it's, in one sense, it's healthy to think of oneself that, no, I'm not getting this, I'm not qualified. One can think that of oneself. It's not too much of a stretch beyond reality to think I'm unqualified for all of this. But then there's sometimes when you'll be reading or hearing and you'll feel that you're getting some new light, some new realization. And that will happen I believe that will happen with everyone to some on one level or not. Your continuing in devotional service, and you're not at the same place you were when, say, 2 years ago or 5 years ago. You're at a different place. Your understanding of spiritual topics and understanding of many things is different than it was originally. Maybe not on everything. Maybe there's still some things, maybe that we're still operating predominantly on the level of some primitive understanding, or you might say something of the principles of Vaidhi Marg, that we're doing things, almost mechanically. We're going through the steps, we're coming into the temple, we're bowing down to the deities, we're singing the same songs, and sometimes we may even lose consciousness of where we are because our mind is distracted. We're thinking of something else that we're supposed to be doing, or that we need to be doing, or something. Maybe, for instance, if you received, for instance, a court order that you have to appear before a magistrate at such and such a date, or something or other, something important like that, then even when you're involving yourself, say in a Mangala Arti or in Arti or offering, you may become a little bit inattentive because you have something of urgency going on in your so-called day-to-day existence, like, oh, I have this problem, I have to come up with so much money by this particular date, or they'll turn off my electricity, or anything, or any other matter can come up. So some days we may be inattentive and we're just going through things mechanically. I mean, maybe we're singing the words and not even really thinking about what we're singing. That may also be, So we're going through things on a level of, what can I say, of just a level of memory, and not even completely conscious. But there may be times when doesn't inspiration also enters into things? Inspiration sometimes works that way, that you'll become inspired and you'll have some thoughts, even though, I've had situations where I'm trying to resolve a problem and it'll go on for days and days and I have no solution. And then all of a sudden, maybe, I'll just get some insight as to, oh, I hadn't thought about this. Maybe this is the answer to that situation. So I'm saying, and you say, well, but here it's being discussed of, we get some illumination. And that's what I'm really talking about. I'm not talking about some inspiration of how I can get the money to pay the rent. I'm talking about, even without my proper attention to sometimes to spiritual matters, I may get some realization of something that I was considering and was not able to resolve by my intellect. I couldn't come up with any kind of solution. And then I may get some kind of inspiration. And that inspiration may come at an opportune moment or an inopportune moment, in the sense that it may even come when I'm not even really thinking about that matter, but I've been thinking about it for days, and then all of a sudden something will come to me. Oh, this is the understanding I didn't have before. Has that happened to you?
Definitely, Maharaj, yes.
Falguni, has that happened to you? I'm sure it's happened to you. Otherwise, if it hadn't, how would you be still interested in spiritual life? Why would you be reading the Jaiva Dharma if you didn't have that kind of you didn't have those kind of thoughts. Obviously, it's happened to you. You're feeling some inspiration to read the Jaiva Dharma. There's something there that you find interesting. I mean, that's that's not a book that people are just checking out of the library and reading generally. I mean, maybe somewhere they are, but generally the topics in that book are topics meant for consideration of devotees. That's why it's being expressed in that way. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I feel if you asked, have you ever had any of these experiences, I would say yes, definitely. We've had those experiences, maybe not so much perception of the divine world and we're able to understand what's going on the eternal plane, but we may have some intimations of things, even on that level. Not exactly realizations even, but maybe intimations. Huh?
Thank you, Maharaj.
Do you think that's a Devashis, do you think that's a fair appraisal of that? I mean, is it
Yeah, Maharaj, definitely.
is it overstated though? I mean,
No,
she is talking about from Jaiva Dharma realizations of the divine plane. And
yeah, but I mean, it all comes in stages, doesn't it? From the very first stage right up to the most divine stage, something like that you see the signposts along the way that yes, I'm going in the right direction.
well, I don't necessarily know about stages in the sense that I've heard that real realization doesn't really begin so much until one is beyond the stage of anartha nivriti. And I can feel definitely I'm not beyond that stage of anartha nivriti when I'm actually been successful in uprooting all these unwanted desires and mundane thoughts and mundane considerations. I'm definitely not on that level where I can understand about divine rasa, about these kind of very, divine and evolved thoughts. I'm not on that plane. I don't feel I'm on that plane. But still, I can say I may have some intimations that plane does exist and that I can understand something about it. Why? Because I've understood something about, we can say, spiritual matters which may be leading up to Sharanagati, up to surrender, or may be helpful in uprooting all these unwanted anarthas, getting rid of them in the first place. So I may have some intimations at least that are helpful. How can I get rid of some of these anarthas? How can I deal with this? I mean, I mentioned too before that one passage in the Prabhupada Jivanamrita where it says that in one sense these things that seem very, these anarthas, these unwanted things, they seem very strongly existing in our consciousness. And Guru Maharaj, Srila Maharaj compared them to ice, which obviously ice is very hard, It's ice is like a very, if you have a block of ice which is several meters in width or depth or anything, like a huge chunk of ice, how are you going to be able to get through that ice if you just have an ice pick? It may take you a long time to be able to chip away at such a large block of ice. But as Guru Maharaj mentions, he says, all these unwanted things within our heart are like ice, but if the temperature is raised, and we're seeing that now, all this talk about global warming and And as a result, we see huge icebergs that just melt down and crash in pieces of ice crash into the ocean. You know, we see that glaciers and everything just melting down and level of the ocean going up, etc. And it's just like Guru Maharaj says, even these mighty blocks of ice, or whole, almost you could say almost a whole a block of ice, almost the size of a province or a state, you know, are just melting down and breaking off and dissolving into the ocean. So obviously, it's not just a question of endeavors on our own part of being able to break such a hard substance as ice, but if we're able to raise our own devotional temperament, in other words, compared to raising the temperature, then the ice will melt. So we have that experience, seeing it in this world. We hear about it all the time. We see pictures of these glaciers melting and falling into the ocean, so we know that's true. And so I may not have, as Falguni's question was about understanding things of, we can say, on the level of the divine plane and rasa. I'm not able to answer questions on that level because I have no experience of that directly. But maybe I have some intimations of that based on. And somebody will say, "Well, what do you mean by intimations?" What I mean is, if I'm able to have any kind of spiritual kind of like understanding that may come in the level of revelation on something of a much not so much of an elevated topic, but if I'm able to have some understanding of verses or discussions that I couldn't understand before, if I'm able to have some intimation or some realization on that level, then at least I know the process of realization exists and it is still active even for myself. And maybe if I ever able to get beyond the level of anartha nivriti, then I can know something about that divine plane. But I also was mentioning that idea of sympathetic strings on a vina or a vina or a
Sitar.
pardon me?
Sitar.
Sitar, yes. Those strings are not played, but they vibrate, and I think we may have something of that sympathetic. Just the words of Guru Maharaj. We're not able, we're not able to say that we're on that level of comprehension that we can understand everything that Guru Maharaj is talking about. But we may get something of sympathetic vibration within ourselves that, oh, this resonates with me. This resonates with me. I don't necessarily have a very much comprehension on this subject, but it resonates with me. That's what I feel. And as for the comment about, well, then what are the limitations of argument? Because we hear about in the past that previous religious arguments and discussions were about such useless topics as in Middle Ages or before, how many angels could dance on the head of a pin, like that, of no practical use or understanding, just somebody wasting their time and perhaps ours discussing things that are of no importance. And I feel a lot of that goes on because I see where people get involved in trying to understand where the jiva comes from and where is the jiva from, what plane, I've seen people who are previously thought of as advanced persons in our mission, like leave the mission because of some topics that they couldn't properly understand, and they insisted on arguing about and debating about something that's of no practical value to themselves and which they couldn't understand, which they're very, their very desperation, which in some cases resulted in them leaving, that really reveals that they didn't have any understanding of this, and why should they have concerned themselves? I don't know. I guess I'm my nature isn't so much to go on and question something I maybe don't understand. I want to just keep on questioning. Sometimes I just rather, close my book, close my computer, go outside and walk in the sun. I find it's more helpful. Get more nourishment that way. But maybe again, sometimes do as I do as I say, and not as I do. Need to follow my own advice sometimes. Any other questions? That was a question from Falguni. It was a good question based on her reading of Jaiva Dharma.
On that live, Maharaj, does it make sense if the interest change in regard of what aspect of devotion you really pick? For example, when talking about my own personal experience, when I met the devotees, I was very interested in philosophy and all these signs of the soul. And of course, it's beautiful, and it still is beautiful. But the more I try to find, things, the more I find myself, like you're saying, incapable of understanding. And again, like I mentioned months ago, sometimes I find myself, because my lack of understanding, inconsistencies. But I cannot find any wrong in the people that is following this philosophy, especially devotees who are surrendering their life. So I feel very attached and very eager to try to serve them in somehow, whatever I can do. But somehow the philosophy is like on a second plane.
Well,
That's
but
my
one
own
thing,
case. I would like to know what you think. What should I do, if that is correct, or what is that?
one thing that Govinda Maharaj said, when many devotees came from, say, ISKCON into the Sri Chaitanya Saraswat Mutt, then there were books written, there were books presented from Guru Maharaj's talks, and that's what Guru Maharaj was talking about, Search for Sri Krishna. Then also there was also Sri Guru and His Grace. But then there came a time, and those books are very wonderful. But then there came a time when Srila Govinda Maharaj, he actually said, after these topics have been discussed and everything, then Govinda Maharaj said, now is not the time for Sri Guru and His Grace. Govinda Maharaj said, now is the time. He says, I feel that among Srila Guru Maharaj's books that should be understood, he said, Subjective Evolution of Consciousness, he said, Govinda Maharaj talked about. This book is very essential because it presents Guru Maharaj's vision of how that divine plane is descending to us through the grace of the Lord and His devotees. And it also gives Guru Maharaj's understanding of subjective reality, which is, and then of course there's a discussion about, as you're saying with philosopher, about the role of philosophy in their, in particular discussion, something of Hegel, who Guru Maharaj quoted, Guru Maharaj would talk about his own understanding of Hegel. He said, thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. And I mean, I can understand why Govinda Maharaj was saying that book is of importance, especially of importance for someone to be able to understand what Guru Maharaj is speaking and what his thoughts are. Give some intimation of his thoughts. That the book, Subjective Evolution of Consciousness. How often do we hear discussion about that book? How often do we consider that book? But Govinda Maharaj said, now is the time for the understanding of that book, Subjective Evolution of Consciousness. So, whereas I said before that I think that sometimes people, they become obsessed with the wrong questions or the wrong subjects. I mean, there was a huge debate in ISKCON, and it continued over to a certain extent in our own society, in our own mission, about the role of the jiva and where the jiva was coming from, what plane the jiva is existing on. I know that in ISKCON, that debate happened between, I think many of you may know, Nisringa Chaitanya. His father's name was Kundali. And Kundali was in about this topic about the origin of the jiva, although maybe it's discussed, I've been told it's discussed in Srila Bhakti Vinod Thakur's, which book is that? It's
Chaitanya Shikshamritam.
No. What is it? Is it?
Oh, Tattva Vivek.
Yeah. Yes. There, I've heard I haven't read that. I heard there's some discussion about that, about the jiva. But I remember Nisringa Chaitanya's father, Kundali, and the person he was associated with when this discussion was going on. That person, whose name was, I don't know his name at the time. Now that person is known as Satyanarayan Babaji. And he's one of the leaders of the so-called Jiva Institute. But the Jiva Institute doesn't refer to the Jiva Atma. The Jiva Institute refers to the writings of Jiva Goswami. And that, but even now, that was one of the concerns to, Tyagi Maharaj, was something about the whole idea of but he was saying that it didn't, he was talking about the jiva and referring it to, strangely enough, to the writings of Jiva Goswami as expressed by this person, Satyanarayan Babaji, who was previously a disciple of Jayatirtha in England. So somehow or other, that became of such importance to him that he more or less took as if you were driving and all of a sudden you took a very sudden left turn and left the road. I know that happened to me once. I one time was driving, I left Texas early in the morning, maybe 4:35 in the morning, and I was driving to my next destination, maybe New Orleans, Louisiana, or something like that. I was driving, and all of a sudden I fell asleep at the wheel. Luckily, uh, I was in the far left lane. There was nobody on the road at that time, fortunately, and my car went from the far left lane through the right lane, through about 100 feet of field, and was at within a few feet of dropping into a drainage ditch made out of concrete, which had a drop of about 30, 50 feet. And it was within a few feet of going into that drainage ditch, which would have been the end of me. And I just happened to wake up at that moment. So somebody can that and okay, I didn't veer to the left. I veered to the right. Fell asleep. It was kind of unnerving when nothing happened to me or happened to my car, but it was very unnerving to me that had happened. And I kind of woke up and threw some water in my face, slapped my face and everything like that, and then walked around for a little while, then got back in the car and continued with my driving. But I mean, it is possible, just like that kind of sudden veer off to the right or to the left. It's also possible that one can leave, devotional service by concerning oneself with some of these arguments which are of not really much substantial importance to one's own devotion. But I found in that subjective evolution of consciousness, the first chapter I thought was fascinating, where Guru Maharaj is discussing with, what is it, Dayadra Garanga, it gives their name as Dr. So-and-so. Dayadra Garanga, he was a PhD, right? And the I don't know who the two, I think the two people in that discussion are Swarup Damodar and Dayadra Garanga. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, and they're discussing is very interesting discussion. It's discussion of the Chittagos, the plane of Chittagos. Chid, we heard before about the question of Falguni was about the Chid plane, or the eternal conscious plane. And the Chittagos is the reflection of reality within this physical world, in the sense that Guru Maharaj says the ancient seers could see the mountains as a person, the wind as a person. If you think about the Govardhan Leela, you can understand that. Indra's calling the Shamantaka clouds, right?
Yeah.
So you can and you can understand the mountains are presented as persons. This isn't pantheism. It doesn't really have anything directly to do with pantheism. It's that the way Guru Maharaj says, in order for a conscious living being to be able to experience what we consider inanimate objects, has to be able to bring those objects to the plane of consciousness. Because we're conscious persons, and to experience something, we have to be able to bring it to the conscious plane. And I'm misrepresenting this, but I'll just say that Guru Maharaj says by bringing them to the plane of consciousness, they become imbued, or they have personality, because consciousness means person. So the real seeing of those, we can say there's something, how would you say that, the Chittagos plane, where the reflection of consciousness within this material, you know, within material, within what, or in other words, like Guru Maharaj stated, he said he saw this world as being matter, like the film on milk, film floating on the surface of milk. And what is the milk in which the film is floating? That milk is consciousness. And what is the film that's floating on that milk of consciousness? That is the material world, what we're experiencing. So we can say that there's the Bahiranga Shakti, the Tatastha Shakti, the Antaranga Shakti, or Chid Shakti, Jiva Shakti, and we can say, and Chid Shakti, Jiva Shakti, and we can say, what's the word for it? We could say ignorance. What is it?
Jada Shakti.
Jada Shakti, or another word is what? Okay, Maya Shakti. We could say Maya Shakti, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, these three planes. I mean, we're normally considering, oh, this is material. It has no jiva soul. It's just material. It's temporary, etc., etc. We understand that. Oh, this table is made out of wood. It's inanimate. It's matter. It's different than who we are. We're jivas, etc. But is there always? We can also say that when in the Vedas they're talking about, just like I said before, the Shamantaka clouds, that they're persons, or that there's so many things that are expressed, and they're not talking about pantheism. That's why I feel I can't properly represent it, but that book, The Subjective Evolution of Consciousness, Srila Govinda Maharaj said that is especially pertinent, especially in the modern world, and especially pertinent now to our understanding of topics of devotion. He gave importance to that. He said it's a very good representation or presentation of Guru Maharaj's, his own particular understanding and philosophy. So I'm not trying to understand everything intellectually, because that's not my forte anyway. But I am interested in those topics which will be useful, especially useful. So I personally feel I got so much from Sri Guru and His Grace. I got so much understanding from Search for Sri Krishna. And I remember Srila Prabhupada telling me, he told me our understanding should be based on our presentation of Krishna consciousness. He said, at least I can understand it at the time, he said, should be based on Bhagavad Gita. The Bhagavad Gita is... I remember we were having a discussion, and he said, and we were walking by the ocean, and somebody said, Prabhupada said, what is that? And somebody said, what's the name of the ocean there? Is it the Indian Ocean? Is that it?
Where?
Say by Bombay.
Oh.
Is it the Indian Ocean?
Arabian Sea. Arabian Sea.
Okay. The Arabian Sea?
Arabian Sea, yeah.
Is that what it is? Okay. So then Prabhupada asked, what is this? And someone said, maybe then, oh, it's the Arabian Sea. And somebody said different answers. And then, but that wasn't the answer he was looking for. He said, of course I know it's the Arabian Sea. I'm your spiritual master. I already understand that. But he said, but, and I said something like it being Krishna's, and then he said, in what way is it Krishna? Maybe I said something like among bodies of water on the ocean. I don't remember what I said, but he said, all right, and we can answer it's Krishna, but you have to be able to better in terms of Bhagavad Gita. He says, you have to present earth, water, Arindam Dandavat. So he said you have to be able to answer better on the basis of Bhagavad Gita. Earth, water, air, fire, ether. Earth, water, air, fire, ether. These are material energies. He said you have to be able to answer better on the basis of Bhagavad Gita. So that's fine, but I'd also say, what was happening with you? Are you well?
I'm doing good. Yeah, just came, bought some pots, honor some prasadam.
Okay.
You're on with someone there?
Another little while, but I didn't see you on Gaur Purnima.
Yeah, it's been, my father came home from the nursing home, so it's been
Okay.
kind of like that. He's bedridden at home, back home though.
Okay. I'll see you in a little while.
Kind of heavy. Yeah, I'm gonna go dance with pots.
Okay. Dandavat. So anyway, we're told to answer on the basis of Bhagavad Gita, and Prabhupada was explaining, and now Govinda Maharaj said, especially for our stage of development, he said we should try to understand something of this book, Subjective Evolution of Guru Maharaj. He felt, it's easy to be enchanted with any of Srila Guru Maharaj's books. Who wouldn't be, so to speak, enthralled with the Lord's loving search for his lost servant? It's so beautifully presented. But Govinda Maharaj had a special appreciation for subjective evolution of consciousness. So Gaurachand, when you're talking about understanding philosophy and all that, but sometimes it's not always so relevant. Yes, it's not always so relevant about what is our conventional understanding of philosophy. But if we take into account Guru Maharaj's presentation of philosophy, which he does in that subjective evolution, it's more, I feel, more vital. I remember when Prabhupada was discussing all the different philosophers, and I forget, they had some book where they published it. But it really, I didn't feel it was going deep enough, because the people who were presenting these philosophers to Prabhupada, they were just like setting up, what do you call it, straw, what do they call it, straw men? It can be easily knocked down, because they were reading about the philosophers and say something like Cliff Notes or something like that, which were not being properly presented, and therefore Prabhupada could easily defeat the arguments of those philosophers, because they were being improperly presented. But you wouldn't want to use those same arguments if you were, for instance, going into a college philosophy class and you voice those same arguments. They would laugh you out of the class, because the philosophers themselves weren't being properly presented. So anyway, I don't know. I'm off topic, I think. Okay. Any other questions?
Dandavad Maharaj, Dandavad devotees.
Oh, Ananta Govinda, I'm seeing you. You are here. And then
Yes.
also we're seeing Indu Leka. But you should change your name from Elibes to Indu Leka. You can change it somehow. Somebody can change that.
Dandavad Maharaj.
Dandavat. How is everything there in Bournemouth?
Yeah, everyone okay. Yeah, they're all okay. Just
Okay.
finished having dinner. They're downstairs.
Okay, I think everyone's going to have dinners. It's almost time to end this discussion. Ananta Govinda, you and your family are well? And Suvasini, how's everything there in the Emerald Isle?
Dandavats Maharaj. Yes, you're all okay. Everything okay, Maharaj.
Okay. So, I don't see today, I don't see Saraswati.
He's in Sweden right now.
Oh. Well, she's gone there quite a bit lately.
Yeah.
So I hope everything's well with her son. So I'm hoping to hear sometime soon or sometime the dates for which you will have the festival in August. It's in August,
Yeah.
right?
Yes, Maharaj. Yeah, as soon as we've got definite dates for Janmashtami, which I think was about the 18th. Most places.
that's all right. But the question is, in the past, you haven't celebrated the deity installation and everything at the time of Janmashtami. Rather, you've celebrated it at a different time, even though it was a few days before Janmashtami, and that serves to give an opportunity to those devotees who are maybe celebrating Janmashtami in their own countries to be able to attend Janmashtami and still be able to participate in the festival there in England. And one of the ways they were doing that is by making it more according to the solar calendar date in which it occurred. Do you remember which date that was?
I don't, but generally we make it the Saturday before Janmashtami.
Okay, so
around there.
Yeah, maybe I could go. Maybe even we'll see. I'll try to arrange it so I go to England, go to Ireland. That will be my goal. Okay. And we'll
Good.
see how to work it. Because I would also try to be. I mean, it's not essential that I be back here in California for Janmashtami. It might be good to be here, but at the same time, I'm more sensitive about Gaur Purnima and everything, and Gurudev's divine appearance and everything. Of course, Janmashtami is a very important date for the community, especially the Indian community. But I mean, it's not like Janmashtami only happens in California. Krishna didn't appear in San Francisco. So I can be somewhere else. Then I said as much as possible by me, I'll try to come there at that time in August.
That's great,
I
Maharaj.
haven't been able to do so for the last couple of years because of coronavirus.
Excellent.
So now people, last question, this is just a thought. People are still getting vaccinated, right? Why is it that people don't get, for instance, vaccinated against measles? It's highly contagious. Measles is highly contagious. I mean, I've had all the vaccinations, and I think they're very important. But how did people stop getting vaccinated against, for instance, measles?
You usually get that when you're in your childhood, don't you? Those vaccinations.
But nowadays,
This is a thing.
What?
This vaccine isn't like that vaccine. This is a totally different new science.
I didn't hear.
It's a totally different new science. It's the spike protein. You know, normally you get stuck in your body something of the disease and then you make an antibody. But this is a new science, this one. So it's not working the same. It's trial. It's a bit in trial, you know.
Okay, I understand all that, but the thing is, and you say people have had the chicken pox when they were kids. I don't think everybody's had chicken pox in the modern era, and I don't think people have had vaccinations against chicken pox, right? So even though
gets consumed, it gets by the people having it. It dissipates, as I understand.
Oh, so then that's what they call the herd effect, right?
Herd immunity, yeah.
Herd immunity.
Over here, they have chicken pox parties. Once one kid gets it, they invite all the local kids so they can get it too.
Is that true?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I mean, not everywhere, but in some circles. My kids went to chicken pox parties because the idea is if you get it when you're a kid, it's not so bad as if you get it when you're an adult.
So do they have COVID parties also?
You betcha.
They should do.
I think they do.
Yeah, they do. I mean, Boris Johnson had a few, didn't he?
Yeah, they're called political conventions. All right. So anyway, it's time to wrap things up, as they say it now. I'll see you again next Wednesday. And it's been very nice seeing everyone, hearing from everyone. And maybe and as I said, now that there's a little less lockdown and then hopefully things will continue on an even keel, and I'll be able to go to UK in August.
That'd be great. Fantastic.
Now that, for instance, as you mentioned, Boris Johnson, he's now outlawed COVID.
Yeah, that's right.
He's outlawed it, so no one's allowed to get it anymore in England. Okay. All right. Dandavats.
Okay,
Dandavats to everyone.
Yeah, Dandavad Maharaj.
Dandavad Maharaj.
Maharaj ki jai.
Dandavats.
Dandavad.